morning. Today is June the 6th. This is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Just as an editorial comment, this is the last Budget and Finance Committee meeting for this fiscal year. My name's Dick Rhodes. I'm the chairman of the committee, and I'd like to call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. And if you could all please stand, and we'll pledge allegiance to the flag. We have two of our members that are excused today, and we have one member that's on video. Mr. Bosak, can you hear us? And if you're there, if you acknowledge.
Sure can. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.
Thank you. Both Director Brown and committee member Christine Novello are excused from the meeting today. So we do have a quorum, and we're going to proceed. The minutes of the May 2nd, 2023 have been printed, and if there's no exceptions, we're going to approve those. Okay, so done. We have a very brief meeting today. Part of that's, it is not part of it, it is intentional on my part. I wanted to finish off the year with our April financials, and so we're going to begin that with Cliff Swan. If you would present those for us.
Thank you, Director Rhodes. Good morning, everyone. Just want to go over the April year-to-date financial performance. And we're in the process of closing May. We should have May posted by the middle of June, and then we'll continue to post the financials over the summer. And then when this BNF committee returns, we'll present them. We'll present May, June, July, and probably August at the September meeting. Well, maybe not August, but May, June, and July at this first September meeting. Okay, so for the month of April, looking at the revenue, we were 123,000 favorable for the month of April. The largest portion coming from golf and merchandise, food and beverage. We didn't budget much for merchandise and food and beverage in April, and it just came in a lot stronger than what we had anticipated. Oops, sorry. On the expenses side, 18,000 unfavorable. You can see the different categories that came in unfavorable. We continue in the supplies and services area with the impact of inflation. Wages and benefits came back. That's mainly due to our pension plan funding. We had over accrued in that, which created a entry that had to be made to adjust in April. So that came back to against the expense account. We always accrue a certain amount, and then once we go through our 401k audit and we go through our pension plan funding, there's always an adjustment right after that because we pay that out yearly. The pension plan, not the 401k plan, the profit sharing plan, excuse me. So looking at the overall impact on the income from operations or the operating cash inflow of 105,000 with those two revenue and expense items. Favorable. And now looking at year to date, on the revenue side, 515,000 favorable on 23.9 million in revenue. and 426,000 unfavorable on the budget side, mostly coming from wages and benefits and taxes, as well as supplies and services and the landscape and repairs and maintenance. Overall, right on budget, 89,000 with 89,000 favorable year to date through March. Versus prior year, we have 378,000 favorable on the operating revenue side and roughly 2 million unfavorable on the expense side, and 1.6 overall unfavorable in the operating cash inflow outflow from operations. Key drivers in that variance is roughly 1.4 million in wages and benefits and roughly 400,000 in repairs and maintenance and supplies and equipment. Looking at the capital related items for the month of April, a couple things to focus on here is APF fees. We're 76,000 unfavorable to budget. We did better in April when it comes to APF transfers, but still fell a little behind budget. That's going to be a different story in May. We're closing May now. We're actually 100,000 favorable in May, so gained a little bit of that ground back in May. And then looking at the investment income, that continues to be favorable year over year, which helps the reserve fund for sure. And then on the unrealized gains and losses, favorable of 109,000 in unrealized gains. Sorry. Year to date, 612,000 behind on APF fees. Again, that's going to drop down to 500,000 in May. So, and those are in June we anticipate to be right on budget. So we should end up about $500,000 behind for the year, but we'll present that in September. Looking at the investment income, 200,000 year to date through April. That's going to continue to be favorable for us at roughly 80,000 a month. So that'll be almost $1 million next year in investment income. And then again, the realized gains and losses for the year were about even at 2,000 favorable in unrealized gains and losses in our reserve investments. It gets a little confusing sometimes when we talk about our year-to-date versus when Cap Trust comes up, because Cap Trust works on a quarterly basis, so they'll tell you that they're $3 million ahead. But for the year, we're about even for July through April. Looking at the APF fees versus prior year, significantly behind at roughly 1.3 million unfavorable to prior year. Again, investment income up 227,000. That helps the cause for sure. And then the unrealized gains and losses, a $3 million swing year over year favorable. Again, APF fees running behind, no surprise there. Reserve fund valuation change, much better than last year. And investment income of $250,000 favorable. Overall, revenues over under expenses with the impact of capital is 400,000 unfavorable in spite of that $1.2 million difference in APF fees. That valuation change really does impact when we look at the overall picture. what I just said really applies to this slide, not the last one. But again, last year with a $3.5 million operating cash inflow, that capital related section really impacted our reserve fund with that valuation change. So not having that negative unrealized loss really helps us when it comes to the reserve fund. Switching over to the capital budget, we have $10.8 million in this budget, and we're projecting to come in right at budget. That 585 is $585. There's no zeros missing at that on that, so coming at right at budget, which is always good. In fact, we're really anticipating, once we're done with the capital spend, at this point being $30,000 ahead of budget. So the details of that capital spend, that $10.8 million, are listed here. These were the capital items that were approved last year, and then the status of those items and how we came to those numbers that were just explained on the last slide. The yellow items are completed. Just a note here on the irrigation project, a large portion of that is going to be encumbered. $4 million or so probably of that will be encumbered, and we'll carry that. We'll pull from the reserve fund to cover that encumbrance, and we're planning for that now. On the allowances, $400,000 budgeted, POs issued of roughly $262,000, $138,000 unspent allowance through April. These are the projects here that allowance was spent on. One note here is that two of these items, the library foundation storage container and the art storage area of roughly $32,000, was funded by those clubs. So that 262 is roughly 230 in terms of cash impact. And then looking at the reserve fund, finished the year last year at 54%, with the year-to-date adjustments that we talked about on the financial statement, the income statement, and on the in the capital section, we budgeted 50% this year. We're going to come in at about 49% right now based on the impacts of those adjustments that we talked about. That concludes my presentation.
Cliff, I do have a question for you.
Yes.
And I apologize because this is cold. You've never heard this before from me.
That's okay.
So would you go over the, once we complete the Grandview irrigation project and all of the irrigation projects, and that will go on to our reserve study. And that has if I'm not mistaken, I've seen that the life expectancy of that's 99 years.
Yes. The pipe, the main line, and the laterals have a 100-year life.
So how will that affect our reserve study and our FFB?
So everywhere where we install that, the value of that amount will be, instead of, we normally had that on at 40 years or 30 years, that's now going to be more than doubled. And so I guess the fully funded balance of that will be extended basically double onto the reserve study, which will have a smaller requirement every year as we move forward, as those projects complete. So as Grandview completes, and then Echo Mesa is the year after next, and I think Stardust, then Pebblebrook. What's that? Yeah, Stardust and then Pebblebrook. Yeah, so it'll impact the reserve study. We won't see the full impact until we complete all of the irrigation projects, which take place over the next 12 or so years.
Did you consider that when you did the projections for out years?
Yes. Well, no, and yes. We haven't completed Grandview yet, so we can't really show that on the modeling. So as far as the modeling shows now, but we're anticipating that as we complete it.
Thank you.
Because that's mostly encumbered at this point. It's carried forward, so it's not on the fully funded balance hasn't been reset yet until it's complete.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
May I ask a follow-up question
Yeah.
on that? I understand the impact. Basically, you're going to spread the depreciation of the mainline piping over 100 years instead of 30 or 40. So, of course, less expense each year.
Yes.
Therefore, will raise the. Is there any? Do you have any idea of approximately out of the, let's call it $7 million job, irrigation job, how many dollars are affected by the main line and lateral line portions of that?
4 million is what
So more than half will have a depreciation cut. That helps. I
Yes.
just wanted to get that out in the public eye. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Mr. Bernardo?
Thank you, Dick. I have a few questions. Can we go to slide 5? They're not numbered, so I had to count from the front. It's the summary of revenue for year-to-date.
I'll get there. Ooh, sorry. Versus prior year or versus budget?
Budget.
Okay. Okay.
I see, as far as golf, that despite the predictions of doom and gloom from a rough winter, we're still $67,000 ahead of where we anticipated to be. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We came in right in terms of rounds. We came in right at budget, maybe a little over rounds for the month of April. And yes, in terms of revenue, we are right at budget.
Which actually is a very good thing.
Yes, so the budgeted rounds were 320,000 rounds.
And so that budgeted was 320,000.
Yes.
And that was before we had a clue how bad the winter was. I mean, that was put together
Yes.
last spring.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so then we had this
Yes.
horrible winter, but the doom and gloom as predicted never came true, is what I'm seeing from here.
What doom and gloom?
As far as we lost a lot of rounds due to frost delays and rain. A
Yes,
lot. And
we
yet
did.
we're still ahead of budget.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I would say we're right at budget on 8.6 million.
Okay, but that's, I mean,
67,000.
how much money did we lose in frost delays and rain, weather delays? Roughly, best as you can come up with.
Ooh, I didn't do the math on that, but if we,
How did we quite a few $100,000,
yes. So
Yes.
we had a better April.
right?
We're having a better April than we budgeted.
Sure.
We had a worse February, a worse January, and a worse March
Sure.
than we budgeted. Yes,
Sure.
so things are coming back.
Yeah, and so, again, we lost a lot of money because we had bad weather, we lost a lot of revenue because we had bad weather,
Yes.
and yet, we're still doing great.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, I mean, and so this is, again, it's not as great as what happened in the prior fiscal year, but resident dues, resident greens fees were raised, and perhaps it wasn't necessary. Next question is on slide 6, the very next one. That's the one. Roughly, I read 20, but how many unfilled positions are there right now?
17,
Okay,
I believe.
and that's full-time and part-time positions?
Yes.
Okay, and were those positions, the cost of those positions, included in the budget for the current fiscal year? When the budget was approved
Yes,
They were.
yeah.
So if we're short those positions, why are we in the red as far as wages, benefits, and taxes? We should, that should be a positive number because those positions haven't been filled. So why are we in the red?
Okay, so the positions come in and out, but collectively, we have been down in positions overall for the year. So the positions that are open now doesn't necessarily mean they were open in July.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's not a 1-for-1 per month thing. However, when we put the budget together last year, we put a 5% increase for minimum wage increase,
Mhm.
and that came in over 8%. So there's one item, which is a
Okay.
large impact on
Okay.
there.
So we only budgeted for 5, but it came in much higher.
Came in much higher.
Okay.
I think that what that did then is it has a cascading effect on all the other wages, compression. Okay.
That's not something we're mandated to do. That's something that we do
yes.
for whatever reason, but it's not something that's
to stay
mandated.
competitive in the wage market, to keep our employees that we've invested time.
And we don't
and
want
energy.
people
There's
who
a
are-
lot of
I know.
business decisions.
And there's the
for sure.
emotional, oh my God, now I'm only making minimum wage. I get that.
Yeah, so we have to address that. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then there's also when we looked at the health insurance, we budgeted a 15% increase. That came in at 34%.
That's a big number.
which was
Okay.
significant. So all of those things combined net out to be, again, on $13.7 or $13.6 million budget, $100,000
I get it.
variance.
It's not a big deal. I don't recall discussing at all this year, and I may just have forgotten. What did we see happen with workman's compensation insurance? Are we seeing a big number coming out of that going forward?
Yeah, we did a presentation on that.
I thought we did.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, so there is I think it was about 12%
Okay.
was the increase on workers' comp,
Okay.
which it's not as big of a number because it's on a much smaller scale than health insurance. So our premiums for workers' comp, I think last year were roughly 120,000, 130,000, less than 150,000. So a 10%, 15% increase on that is not a very big
Mhm.
impact
Mhm.
overall, like on health insurance.
We watch the
Much
pennies.
more
The dollars will take
significant.
care of
Yes,
themselves.
yeah.
Let's go to 11. Summary of capital related, year to date.
Okay.
That's the one. We had, I think you said, this is year to date, I'm sorry, investment income net of fees. The prior slide, 10.
Okay.
And so this is April, investment income net of fees, 40,000, correct?
Versus budget, yes,
Okay.
favorable.
Which is good. My question is, did I hear you before say that you're anticipating that that number is probably going to be about 80,000 a month for
Yes.
the rest of this year?
Yeah, it's more consistent with April, correct.
I see. Okay, that's good news. And then, bear with me. I'm one of those neurotic people. You probably figured that out by now. Last question is the first page of the spreadsheet. That's a little deeper in there at page 18, I believe. And you don't necessarily have to go to it. The golf ball dispensers, when are we going to get them?
I believe those are set to be delivered in this month. Yeah.
Why has it taken a whole year to get them? I mean, they were approved a year ago.
I don't know. We could talk to Pat about that exactly, but I know that there's been just general supply chain issues. Okay. And then the timing of when we install them as well and the impact to golf, we want to make sure we do it in the right time period so it's not, there's a learning curve there as well.
Okay, and it also looks like delaying it would cost us $4,000 because it's over budget, is what I'm looking at. In other
Well,
words, they were budgeted, the budgeted approved amount was $84,141, and they're coming in at purchase orders of 88,566.
That's an assumption you're drawing. I can find out if that's the case.
Okay. Okay, good. Thanks.
Yep.
Ms. Redmond?
I have a question, Cliff, and it's
Yes.
on the balance sheet, which is in the
Okay.
packet.
Okay.
Just one, it's accounts payable. At June 30th, it was 836,000. By April 23rd, it's almost 3.1 million in accounts payable. Is that a couple of large vendors that have to be paid out?
Yeah,
I'm
that's
just
the-
curious what's causing this.
Yeah,
It's-
that's
It's
just
almost $2.3 million increase in accounts payable.
right. That was the payment to Brawley for the performance payment on the irrigation project.
Okay,
That was booked in payables. It just hadn't been
gotcha.
issued yet.
Thank you.
But that's a good question, and that's what it was. That was like roughly, I think it was $2,251,000.
Okay, so that's most
That
of it.
payment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hobald?
A clarifying question on the expenses in the month. There is a realized capital expense of minus $99,000. To me, that means we sold some securities and booked a loss, as opposed to generally these things
That's-
showing up under unrealized gains and losses.
Yes.
Can you maybe clarify what that was and
Absolutely.
get that out in front of the community?
Absolutely. So that was the initial liquidation of $1 million for the encumbrance that we're going to have to pull from the reserve fund come November. So we're going to encumber a large portion of the irrigation project, the Grandview irrigation project, because it won't be paid for. So when we get our audited financials, we look at the reserve fund impact and what we're either going to put into the reserve fund or draw from the reserve fund based on our capital spend. And we're going to have to draw from the reserve fund after the audited financial statements of this year. And we're positioning for that, and we don't want to do it in October. We want to do it in a way that makes the most sense. So, and has the least impact on gains and losses. And so what we did is we positioned ourselves by pulling $1 million, selling $1 million worth of investments, and then reinvesting that in short-term treasury. So it's still 4 to 5%, I believe. We're going to get back on it, but we don't want to do that all at once, and we want to try and do it strategically so we minimize the impact on gains and losses, and maybe it even works out favorably for us.
Yeah, I understand the concept that,
Yeah.
buy low, sell high.
Yeah.
And so we sold when we thought the conditions.
Yes.
And you spread that out, averaging, that makes perfect sense to me. What I didn't understand was if we'd been marked to market all along with our securities, wouldn't we have already reflected the loss in value in those securities, and the sale would be sort of neutral?
Yeah, we
realized. That's the part I don't understand, and I'm looking for some help with.
Yes. Yes, we had already booked the unrealized losses on that. We just moved them to realized at the time. So the net effect is 0. We just moved them from unrealized to realized. That's correct. I mean, you are correct, but we did move them to realized losses versus unrealized losses.
I appreciate the acknowledgement that I'm correct. I'm still not sure I completely followed what you have, but
Pete,
you
wanna
made a
s-
good
you-
attempt at it there. Thank you
Well,
for
Pete's
trying.
Pete will speak on it.
You actually said it correctly, Cliff. Every month, Every single month, we have our valuation of the 31 million is adjusted for the valuation change. Every month, that's placed into unrealized. In the months when we do a security liquidation, that's the only time that you reference a actual realized. But as you said, if we're at 31 million and we sell off 1 million, the cost basis of those securities when we bought them has a valuation. And sometimes you get some gains and sometimes you get some losses. But the valuation is reflected every single month. So when we do the valuation at the end of the month, when those securities are changed, I'm not saying it any clearer than him, but there's no impact by turning it into cash and then reinvesting it into the T-bills. So I probably didn't help the cause there, but essentially realized and unrealized are non-impactful for a tax-exempt association like ours. It would be much more impactful if you were trying to, adjust for your tax implications, but we don't have that impact at all.
Thank you.
We have other questions? Susan?
I have one question, and I understand this, that encumbrance, going back to the encumbrance, you figure about 4 million?
Well, we also have to, just on that irrigation project. But
Right.
there's other projects that are incorporated in that.
Sure.
So once we get the audited financial statements,
Mm-hmm.
the encumbrance, we've also got items from last year that were encumbered forward. So when we look at encumbrance, we have to look at a rolling number. It's not just 1 year impact.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
David Miller?
So, Cliff, do you have the preliminary projections for the rounds of golf in May?
Yeah.
So how did we do compared to budget?
We came in ahead of budget. I don't know the exact number, but we came in ahead of budget.
Okay.
I would say probably roughly the same as April.
And remind me again, we were above budget by how much in April?
$1,118.
Revenue of 34,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Bosak, you've been noticeably silent. Would you like to add anything?
It's the new me, Dick.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
I just have a couple.
Okay.
Cliff, you got a peek, I'm sure, at a little bit of what May looks like financially. Before you close, it'll probably be 10 to 14 days, but no large surprises. You expect us to be close on budget for May?
Yes. Maybe a little ahead.
We just have to make it through June, and then we're starting afresh.
That's correct.
I just finished a conversation with my investment guy a couple days ago, and when I set up my account with him in 1994, a large part of that strategy was a bit conservative. So we were laddering CDs, and it worked out. It's not a large portion of the total, but anyway, we're getting back into that now. And I was wondering if Pete had given that any consideration, given the rates that those things are offering today versus what our pittance of a return has been.
Well, Pete's on his way up to the microphone, but I'll say we are doing that, not with CDs in the operating account with T-bills, but in the reserve fund. I don't know that we're going to be jumping ship on strategy. Pete.
You said it correctly. So we have two different cash accounts. Gary, if you're referencing the operating, we made the play back in January to deploy about $8 million into T-bills. And that has matured to about $100,000 of operating income in the current year. With the large expenditures going out the door right now for the Grandview project. We have now turned that $8 million into about $5 million, which is essentially about the floor for which we have for our operating account normally. But that, we don't ladder those, but we were doing them on 30-day increments because the yields were inverted over a longer term. So we were getting almost 5% versus lower 4 on the 90s or the 180 days. Cliff mentioned on the, I don't want to go too far into it unless you want to, but on the reserve funds, there's been a lot of discussion over that in the last year about laddering, but as the Cap Trust folks mentioned, essentially that's what a lot of the funds accounts do. They're professionally managed, and the bonds in particular, as they're falling off, they're buying at the higher rates. So it's happening thousands of times a day, or a month, I should say.
Okay, thanks very much.
Do we have any other questions from the committee?
A quick note on rounds. I mean, golf rounds last year were 333,000. This year they're tracking about 320. So if we decide to put a budget together for 315, we want a budget based on what could potentially happen. And we have to be optimistic, but we can't be too optimistic. And then the impact of that has an impact on the income from operations, or the cash inflow or outflow from operations, which in turn has an impact on the reserve fund. So we have to look at the full picture. So when we look at golf rates, when we look at dues, and we look at all these other levers we can pull, it's all part of the equation. So, we have to be careful. And yeah, could there be some blue sky out there for golf rounds? I hope so. I hope so. And it's very potential. But if we look at last year versus this year, I got to be honest. When Pete said we're going to budget 320, I was like, man, seems like we could budget more. Well, that turned out to be a good decision. Anyway.
Any other questions? So we have a very short agenda, so I would like right now to ask if anyone in the audience has a question or would like to make a comment about the budget and the finance. Okay, if not, I do. We're going to, Cliff, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good. We appreciate your effort on this. We're going to proceed to item 302, and that's basically some extemporaneous comments that I would like to make as the chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee. We have 8 members on this committee, and they're all homeowners, and they're all very qualified professional people that have done a tremendous job. Mr. Bosak, Gary Bosak, David Miller, Susan Redmond, Ann Brown, Frank Bagnato, Christine Novello, John Hobolt, and myself. I would like to say that I have found this to be one of the hardest working, very focused group of volunteer people that I've had the privilege to work with. And I hope that the homeowners of Sun City West realize how fortunate they are to have a committee that is this dedicated and focused. They have literally put in hours, hundreds of hours. We've met 14 times, and that doesn't count the preparation for the meeting. So, and I can only speak for the Budget and Finance Committee. I know there are other committees that have the same commitments. Susan Redmond, Ann Brown, and John Hobalt will not be returning to the, they have asked to drop off the committee. I want to give them a special thank you for all of the effort that they've done. So thank you very much. We should be proud of our accomplishments. the budget formulation, as Tim made a very some very insightful comments at the governing board meeting the other day. The budget is kind of a moving process. It's a work in progress. We started way back, and in seriousness, we started in February, but we started before that preparing ourselves to understand what our investments are doing and what our compelling issues are and what our capital requirements are and what's happening with wages. We've made, the Budget and Finance Committee alone has made multiple recommendations to the governing board. Some were accepted, some were not, some were compromised, and which is fine, because that's how we get a final product. Is it the product that everybody wants? I don't think it was the product that everybody at this table wanted, but it was the best that we could do, and it was a very good product. Now, what that does do is it helps us clarify what are the issues that we want to work with this coming year. Well, I think those things are very clear. The banking credit card fees. I don't think there's a person in this room that would say, oh no, let's just leave it the way it is. That's not the way it's going to work. An index. What do you mean index? What does that mean? Is it the CPI? Is it an index just for Sun City West? You know, is it what kind of an index? We want to look at that. We want to look at, is it a feasible? Is it a viable? Is it a reasonable option? Do we make our own? Do we use something else? That's all going to be, I'm sure, that will be discussed next year. APFs, how many? How many do we want to project? That's a huge amount of money. 100 APFs, multiply that times $5,000. Pretty soon you got a lot of money. And we know what it's like to not meet our expectations. We're seeing that right now, probably $500,000. But we projected that early on. The other thing is that we want to work what we've heard, and we've heard it very clearly. We want to work more closely with the golf committee. We want to understand what's their business model for determining projections and for determining revenue. We're not trying to get into their business, but our business is your business. And that is, you know, every time they tell you that's not about the money, it is about the money. You know, and we want to look at the generation of the revenue from that. And who's paying? Is it an equitable payment? You know, I think Mr. Bagnato has made some very interesting comments about, you know, what about the public play? Let's look at that. I can't promise a thing other than we do want to look at that. So that's me looking into the future. And it's something that is very critical, and it's very meaningful to all of us. So at that, I want to again thank the committee members. I want to thank Cliff, and I want to thank Pete and Bill Schwind and Terry West. And I mean, there are so many people. I can tell you, I know from a firsthand perspective that I've talked with Pete and I've talked with Cliff after the meetings, and they wanted to make the conversation really short because they're on a short leash to make all the changes that had to be made in a very short period of time. My sense is that they had a lot of midnight hours. So they are very focused and dedicated. We didn't accept some of their recommendations. You know, I remember sitting in Bill Schwind's office and said, oh no, Bill, that doesn't work. You know, and there is an issue of reliance and helping, and the amount of support that they freely provide to us. So this is our last board meeting, or excuse me, our last Budget and Finance Committee of the year. I've canceled the one that is at the end of June. I didn't think other than coming in here and, and looking at each other, that we really wanted to do that. So those are my comments, and I want to extend my sense of appreciation and my honor to be able to sit here and to do this and perform this on your behalf. So thank you very much. At that, we're going to ask for committee comments, and I'm going to start with my friend, Mr. Vignato.
It's funny, he called me his friend. I've said enough for this past term, but the one thing that I have not ever said was that Dick Rhodes has made it a pleasure to be on this committee and more than met with my expectations. So thanks, Dick.
Robo?
Thank you. It's been my pleasure and privilege to work with this past and present members of this group of volunteers. Individually and collectively, you are awesome. You have given your time, talent, and energy to the community, with your only compensation being the satisfaction of knowing the community is better off for your service. The discussion over the last year, in fact, the last 4 years, has been candid and respectful in every way. This kind of a communication has led to creative tension. And the creative tension is what causes our growth and gives us our growth. These comments apply and are multiplied many times over to all of those who have served on the governing board. Thank you. No departure would be complete without expressing my appreciation to the wonderful and competent management staff of Sun City West. Our general manager, CFOs, past and present, Carl Wilhelm, and others who will go unnamed, keep our community being what it is, and we should all be very grateful for that. I feel privileged to have been a small part of such a fine group of people for the last 4 years. I'll miss you. Keep up the good work on all of our behalfs, and thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Susan Redmond?
Yes, John, I think you did a wonderful job of summarizing my feelings in terms of being a member of this particular committee. So I think I'll make my comments very short because I think John did a wonderful job. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Rhodes, as well as the committee members. I've enjoyed working with all of you as well as the staff. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
David Miller?
I'd like to thank Dick for giving me the opportunity to participate in the committee. When I retired a number of years ago, I really was burned out and I needed to take a break. I have found serving on the committee and serving the community to really be a very energizing, creative opportunity. There has been a creative tension on the committee. We don't always agree. There's some sausage making that goes on behind the scenes in terms of individual conversations. But I do think that we tried to address a number of very substantive topics this year. The committee next year, whatever its composition may be, is going to be challenged. The credit card issue, the index issue that Dick referred to, all of those things are going to be big lifts for the community as a whole. We heard at the last governing board meeting, the comments predominantly were focused on credit card fees. Certainly, I know I've already started looking at the list of things that I hope Cliff gets asked next year in regard to credit cards and processing fees and how we select vendors and how often those vendors are reviewed and whether they're still meeting our needs. I'm giving you the list right now, Cliff. to give you a preemptive start there. So really and truly, that is something that I do think we need to look at, which right now it doesn't appear that we are looking at. Well, the committee is not, okay? So anyway, I hope the committee next year continues to serve the community as a whole. This is a great group of people. One of the things that I have noticed is that we have managed to maintain our sense of humor, which is really important in this because there sometimes is that creative tension, but we've always tried to smile at the end of it and move forward in a positive way. So again, thank you, Dick, for giving me the opportunity. I do really like the idea of working more closely with the golf committee. I've expressed that concern before. So I'm glad to see that that's moving in that direction. Thank you.
Mr. Bosak?
Thanks, Dick. I'm finishing my third year on budget and finance, and all 3 of those years I've been able to say that I've had a really, really great friend and relationship with John Hobolt. He's a unique individual, as you all know, very bright, very insightful, passes off these probing questions that he asks. He already knows the answer, but he just wants to make sure that he gets the same thing back at him. He's too smart a guy not to do that. Great pleasure serving with you, John. I thank Ann Brown, not only for her leadership of the committee, but giving me the chance, actually 2.5 years ago, to serve on the committee. I think most of you know I've served on just about every committee there is. And I will say to you that it all starts with leadership. I've seen the best, the worst, and some of the in-betweens, but we've been fortunate the last 2 leaders we've had for budget and finance that they've given us latitude, they've given us opportunities, they've given us leadership. And that's why this committee has been so successful. The other reason it's been so successful is because of the fabulous staff, the underappreciated staff in Sun City West. They make the job of all the committees so much easier. I mean, I can't even imagine working with some of the people that have been in those chairs in the past. But the group we've got right now, the group that Bill Schwinn has put together, is as strong a staff as there could possibly be. And the leadership that they provide, the support that they provide for the committees, well, that's all that allows them to be successful. So whatever success any of us achieve, we got to look at them to be a very, very large part of it. I think that's all I've got, but I thank Dick for the opportunity to serve again next year. It's been very enjoyable. I love the give and take. I appreciate the intellect of the people on this committee. Again, that isn't always the case. You've got people with personal agendas sometimes that you want to take by the neck and strangle, but that hasn't been the case with this committee. Dick has managed that very, very well. And I think that we've got a lot to look forward to. We've got a strong base to build from next year. And I'm anxious to get started. I think some of the things that we're going to have to deal with haven't even been surfaced yet. But that's part of our job, is to come up with those ideas that will make Sun City West better. So thanks to Dick, thanks to John in particular, and thanks to all of you for allowing me to serve with you.
Thank you, Gary. We're going to open up to comments from the audience, but I want to say 2 more things, one of which is I want to recognize Ann Brown. Ann is one of the more insightful, professional people that I've had the opportunity to work with. She walked away from being the chairman of Budget and Finance when she asked me if I would be willing to come onto the committee, and only if I would come onto the committee. But she's just one of the people that I look at and said, okay, this is a role model for anybody. And the other third person I want to recognize is Christine Novello. And Christine does not have a finance background, but she's a critical thinker. And that's what sold me on her. The issue with Christine, and I want everybody to hear this, you know, we've heard all along that people want to stand up or step up and be on the governing board or be on a committee. She did it. She said, yes, I want to be on the Budget and Finance Committee. Not only do I want to be on the Budget and Finance Committee, I want to be on the governing board. So there's a path. And I would encourage all of you to seriously, not just the people in this room, but the people that are listening to this and that will be here listening to it in a month from now. Please, step forward. We need you. Okay? So at that, I want to open it up to the anybody in the room. So if you have comments or questions or suggestions, hearing none. We do have one. Please step up. And you know the business process. Give us your name and number.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. My name is Bruce Lees, 135-422. It's a pleasure to be here today. I just have a couple of quick questions. I believe in the budget that was proposed and passed that there was some discussion that the employer contributions to health insurance were going to increase. Did that in fact go, was that a budget committee recommendation or how did that come about?
Actually, Cliff, I'm going to answer it and then I'm let you in. It's part of the incentive for retention of staff. So I think it was bumped 5%. Is that right, Cliff?
Yes, we instated that in January 1 of 22. Yeah, calendar year 22, and budgeted for that and approved in the budget process in this year's budget last year.
Am I correct in the understanding that Sun City West pays full-time employees health insurance premiums at 85%?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the other issue is that what kind of responsibility and oversight does the budget committee play in addressing high cost of workman's comp payouts? In the last 4 years, we paid out over $511,000 for the claims. Now, granted, that amount came about mostly from claims that were from a few years ago, and I know that the claims paid out over the last few years have been less, but that's still $500,000 for an organization that's relatively small. And then, of course, we're suffering consequences of increased premiums. So I know from having been in the safety business that if you reduce claims, then that typically can affect premiums. Now, I understand that there's usually a window that you have to meet to enjoy those reduced premiums, but I'm wondering to what extent budget and committee looks at that.
I can tell you, again, I'm going to start something and I think Cliff would finish it. We are aware of the issues in workman's comp and also in health insurance. Both of them, specifically health insurance, have had significant increases. Workman's comp is mandatory. We have to provide workman's comp. We are looking at that. We've tried to hire a safety manager. As a matter of fact, we did hire a safety manager.
Lasted 2 days.
That lasted about 24 hours until he got a better job and more money.
Right.
So we are painfully aware of that. We're working to we acknowledge that there are certain things that a safety manager could do for us, and that's why we're trying to recruit for them. Cliff?
The only thing I'd add there is I encourage you to go back to February and watch. We had the presentation for our workers' comp, and that
I did watch it,
okay.
yes.
And if you saw that, then you would know that our premiums have only increased. I believe at the last 5 years, the last 2 years, it was 7% roughly. So we've actually done a really good job with keeping our premiums down, but we're always looking to get better for sure.
Right, and my point isn't necessarily surrounding the money, it's surrounding the actual reduction of the incidents. And then I also believe that a safety person is in fact important, that the search continues, but I also believe it's not just a part-time position as it's currently advertised. Safety costs money, and so does prevention. So, it may be worth investigating. That's my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else? It is exactly 10 a.m., and I'm going to adjourn this meeting. The next Budget and Finance Committee meeting will be September the 5th of 2023, and that will be the first meeting of the new fiscal year. We're adjourned.